Sacramento Kings basketball is finally back in our lives, starting with preseason game number 1 against the Warriors at Golden One Center in front of a sold out crowd for a preseason game, and a crowd that was obviously very excited for the debut of DeMar DeRozan. And it sounded like it. It sounded like a regular season game in there, the way that crowd was getting hyped. And DeMar absolutely delivered. Obviously, the big headline is him going a perfect 6 for 6 from the field, leading the team in scoring with 15 points, and really just coming in and looking like he fits perfectly into this Kings offense. I really think everything that us Kings fans had in our head for what we wanted to see from this team and from DeRozan and what we were excited to see, DeRozan delivered on. The rest of the, starting unit delivered on. The way that the offense flowed beautifully. And throughout training camp, every player and Mike Brown, every time they were interviewed, were asked about, how DeRozan fits, how it affects, whatever player they were asking. It's like, how does DeRozan's addition affect you? And every time the answer from every player was, nothing really changes. And from Mike Brown, it's like, yeah, nothing really changes offensively. And that's exactly what we saw. There's no spacing issues with this team, at least not from the starting unit, because DeMar just plugs in so beautifully. He was running those DHO actions with Sabonis. That relationship was just beautiful. The way DeRozan was just able to come off and get into the mid-range, set up right at the elbow where he wanted to, or at times get going downhill towards the rim more into the paint and just rise up and hit those mid-range shots. There was a play where Fox sets a screen a little deeper in the paint for DeRozan, who comes around Alex Len at the opposite elbow with the ball, feeds a beautiful pass leading DeRozan right to the rim, and he gets going to the rim and scores. And so it was just everything that we could have imagined from DeRozan's debut, and exactly how we wanted him to fit in that role that Harrison Barnes had before. Just now, instead of Harrison Barnes being in that role, you have a guy who can actually knock down that mid-ranger consistently, who can actually move around the court without looking super slow. He's actually able to cut to the rim, and Sabonis is able to find him. So I just obviously could not be any more excited about getting to watch more of DeRozan. The Kings offense scored 68 points in the first half, which is when the starters played. The starters weren't playing in the second half. They scored 41 points in the second quarter, and it was a very entertaining back and forth, high scoring first half to this game. There's so much to talk about from this first preseason game. One, because it's just the first game, so we're back. We get to, see how every individual player is playing and how everyone comes in and slots in together. But then also because you have everyone who's available to play is playing. So we get to talk about every single player that played. And I believe that's probably 16 players, because I think we have 21 on the roster right now. Then we have 5 out due to injury: Trey Lyles, Jordan McLaughlin, Kevin Huerter, Devin Carter, and Orlando Robinson. So almost our entire bench unit, outside of Monk and Len. And so that's something we kind of have to keep in mind, is a lot of our second unit was not out there. And so when you look at Jalen McDaniels coming in with that second unit, or Mason Jones coming in with that second unit, it's like, hopefully those guys will not actually have to play big roles with the team. But yeah, there is so much to get to from this game. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, Mike Brown, before the game, he said, the starters are only playing the first half. I don't know if that was meant to include Malik Monk, but Monk left the game due to personal reasons at some point in the first half. So hopefully everything's okay there. The report is that he is not expected to miss an extended period of time. So obviously we don't know what's going on, but hoping for the best for him. Hopefully everything's okay. But then another thing Mike Brown said is he's not calling any plays. It's all read and react offense out of their typical actions. And so that was just kind of a fun thing to know that everything that the Kings were doing was just off of the fluidity of the offense and how it already looked so fluid with DeRozan coming in. He just slotted in perfectly. And I think him being such an experienced player helps a lot with that. And obviously DeRozan looked great, but Domantas Sabonis also looked amazing offensively. Obviously working well with DeRozan in that dribble handoff game, found him once on a backdoor cut, but even outside of that, it was Sabonis pushing the ball in transition and stopping and popping for a mid-ranger. Like, that's something that we just normally didn't see from him. We heard in training camp that Mike Brown was encouraging Sabonis to shoot like 3 to 5 3-pointers a game, I think. And he didn't shoot any in this game, which was interesting because we just heard like he's supposed to be taking more 3-pointers, but he took so many mid-rangers. And so that was the interesting part. So yes, there weren't any 3-pointers, but we saw those mid-rangers. And, some of the not taking 3-point shots comes down to him just wanting to be within the arc, operating the offense. And I think that it helps a lot when you have a guy like DeRozan. Sabonis can set up within the arc, and it helps DeRozan for him to be within the arc because then he's already in the mid-range when that DHO action happens. And so that pulls Sabonis inside the 3-point line. But Mike Brown talked about wanting Sabonis sometimes to pop out to the 3-point line. We didn't see that, but I just don't think there were many opportunities. And so I think maybe in different matchups, we will see him popping out to the 3-point line more, and we'll see if he does start taking more 3-pointers. But the mid-ranger looked beautiful in this game. He didn't hesitate at all on that mid-ranger. He was just constantly getting to the elbow, and then, someone would cut off him. There was a play where Keon cuts off of him when Sabonis has the ball. Looney drops back to cover that pass off, and then Sabonis just pops the mid-ranger. He went 5 for 7 from the field in this game for 11 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. And really those 4 assists, that's not even really the extent of his playmaking because he was making so many beautiful interior passes. When DeRozan when it was first announced that DeRozan was coming to Sacramento, I thought that the number one guy that would benefit from that was Domantas Sabonis because it would take that scoring load off of him. And if he's able to knock down those mid-range shots, then it's just going to set Sabonis up for such a perfect season because all he has to do is sit right at the elbow, knock down those middies, and then facilitate from there. He threw multiple kind of lob passes to Keegan inside that Keegan would, lay up. He was just throwing dime after dime inside, threw one to Jalen McDaniels that McDaniels didn't finish. And so obviously in the playmaking sense, Sabonis just picking up from where he left off, but those mid-rangers are super intriguing. And then the things that the Kings have been emphasizing in training camp are really playing with a high tempo and then crashing the offensive glass even more than they did last season, even though they were solid in terms of offensive rebounding last season. I thought you saw some of those signs of offensive rebounding early on, and then definitely with kind of the third, fourth stringers coming in, those guys were crashing the glass. I do think it'll probably take a little getting used to for the team to always be crashing the glass, but we did get eight offensive rebounds in this game. And so I thought the offense was really just working well. And they were working well early on with that starting unit without hitting threes. But it didn't feel like they needed to hit threes. And last season, it felt like so many times they were too reliant on the 3-point shot. They only shot 27 3-pointers in this game to the Warriors 52. I mean, the Warriors made 28 3-pointers. And the Kings only shot 27. That would be a record for the Warriors if this wasn't a preseason game. That would be a regular season record for the Warriors, but there was never any problem with spacing. It was just that the Kings, they didn't knock down their open looks really, and then they were just knocking down either from the mid-range or getting inside. DeMar, he was attracting defenders at the 3-point line. That was no problem. He even knocked down a corner 3, which he shot really well from the corners last season. And so that's something that hopefully he can continue to do. I think to kind of finish off on DeMar's game, just what he did defensively, I think you saw him kind of try to make some plays defensively where he tried to get into the passing lanes and get some deflections, which is not something that you normally saw Harrison Barnes doing. And so I think that's really going to be the main difference between DeRozan and Barnes defensively. Although we didn't see DeRozan get any rebounds, so that's about, the same as Barnes in these past couple seasons. I also liked the way that DeRozan was playmaking out of his drives. We didn't see really any just pick and roll with Sabonis where Sabonis was rolling to the rim. And that was something that I was interested in. I feel like that might be something that comes with time and especially like later in games. So I am interested to see that. We didn't really see that at all this game. But yeah, DeRozan fitting in really well. Defense for the starters was definitely not great. They just didn't look connected. They didn't look like they were on the same page when it came to the movement, that fast-paced movement that the Warriors were using. There was just so many times where guys were late to switch. They just were a little confused on, who's going after who. And that's what the Warriors offense is supposed to do. It's supposed to confuse you. It's supposed to get guys open from three. And that's absolutely what it did. But I thought early on it also got guys open in the paint because the Kings were, getting a little confused. And that opened up lanes for the Warriors to get into the paint. And then, kind of maybe early in the second quarter or late in the first quarter, when the Kings maybe steadied the ship a little bit, then the Warriors just started to hit threes. Draymond was hitting threes. Kuminga was hitting threes. And it's pick your poison with who you're going to leave open. You kind of have to leave Draymond and Kuminga open at times, and they combined 6 for 10 from three. And then you have Buddy coming in and hitting contested three-point shots. He went 6 for 7. Obviously, you have Steph knocking down a few. So they were knocking down their threes. So I thought kind of in that middle part of that first half, it wasn't bad Kings defense, but it was the Warriors shot making. And then again, the Kings defense kind of let up towards the end of the first half. That allowed the Warriors to just continue the onslaught offensively. So definitely things need to be cleaned up on that end. Hopefully that's just like the sharpness that'll come with playing these preseason games. And I thought the refs were still allowing that kind of same physicality that we saw towards the end of last season. So that's something the Kings need to be utilizing. I think Monk needs to be better defensively. A lot of guys off the bench were like Jalen McDaniels, Mason Jones, just kind of felt out of control at times. And Mason Jones fouled out of this game in 17 minutes. So it's definitely the defensive side of the ball that is the concern. Keegan Murray, though, looked good defensively. He had that one possession where he locked up Curry, and the crowd was going crazy. But then even on that possession, it's like Keegan's locking up Steph, but then Fox kind of gets caught ball watching, and then it leads to a solid look from three for D'Anthony Melton that he misses. So then it's still like a cool play where Keegan locked up Steph. But I think those are the moments that the focus just needs to be there a little bit more. A lot of gambles defensively that don't fly against the Warriors when they have Steph out there. One thing from Fox that I liked was the way that he was moving off the ball when DeRozan had the ball. It was a lot of cutting. Sometimes he was the one screening for DeRozan, and he was definitely trying to get downhill, get to the rim. It didn't always work because the refs were allowing that physicality, and so that's something that I think players still need to adjust to, because the NBA just went so far where any contact was a foul. Now it's like, okay, you actually need to have some finesse around the rim because you're not just going to get the foul call. But I like the aggressiveness from Fox. Keon Ellis on the offensive end didn't really have much to do. Like, there were plenty of times where I felt like DeMar was constantly driving into the paint, and he would find Keon on the perimeter, and then Keon would just need to make that next pass because he wasn't open for three. But that next pass would then lead to a bucket. That's kind of how he racked up his 4 assists in this game. So I think it was just one of those games where he didn't find himself in it with opportunities to shoot the ball a lot. He didn't even attempt a three, but he was just making the right plays. And then Monk came off the bench and was just, lighting it up. offensively like he normally does. That's just normal. Monk is back. One play in the second quarter that I absolutely loved was Keon and Isaac Jones both coming together at the rim to absolutely swallow up a layup attempt from DeAnthony Melton. I think it was Isaac Jones that got the block in the end. He ended the game with 2 blocks, 1 steal. I said in my 1 stat per player video that Isaac Jones, my stat was stocks. He got 3 of them in this game. So that was a very good sign. Also, for some of the other players, let's go through. Keon Ellis, I said fouls per game. He had 0 fouls. Keegan Murray, I said it was his defensive positioning, who he was guarding. In this game, he guarded some Steph, like he did last season. But he also guarded some Kuminga, and he didn't really allow Kuminga to get to the rim, which was good, but also Kuminga wasn't really attacking, and he was just settling for threes. So I don't really know how to feel about that one yet. Let's get to the bench, though. We got our deep bench players and some of the guys competing for that last roster spot. The first guys to come in were Jalen McDaniels and Mason Jones, I believe. And so the guys that were playing with each other, it was DeRozan and Fox playing with each other, and then Sabonis, Monk, and Keegan stayed together, which was interesting. I don't know if that's how we're always going to do it, but I feel like, that makes sense to me. But also we saw times where kind of Alex Len was out there with a 3-guard lineup where it was, I think, Fox, Monk, and Mason Jones with one other player who I can't remember. I think, it was DeRozan with those guys. And so I feel like that also makes sense where if you're running those 3-guard lineups, you need to have the rim protector in there and Alex Len. So I liked those rotations. Obviously, we don't know what the exact rotations are going to be just from the first preseason game, especially with so many guys out for the Kings. But yeah, Jalen McDaniels, I thought he started the game off pretty well, even though he missed a 3 early on. Like he got to the free throw line, which was my stat to watch for him, which was kind of, moving off the ball. He was cutting, he was getting to the rim. So I really liked that. And he was playing some solid defense. And then it just all fell apart for him for the rest of the game. He just was gambling for steals. He was fouling jump shooters. He was missing wide open shot after wide open shot. He was missing at the rim. Like, it was bad. I said when we first got him, I'm like, don't expect anything from him. But then, of course, like, over time, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I want to be like, he can be something. And I don't want to just judge him off one preseason game, I want to give him more of a chance. But it's a really bad start, let's be honest. This was how he was in Toronto. So should we expect anything more? No. But, he can get a little more time before we really make a judgment. Mason Jones, the other guy who was coming in early with him, didn't look good either. I mean, he fouled out, like I said, just didn't look good defensively. He was either fouling or he was, trying to shoot the gap on a screen and allowing an open 3-pointer. He wasn't afraid to shoot, though, and he banked in a 3. He hit 2 threes. He had a nice moment where he was diving on the floor, getting the Kings possession on a loose ball. So there were those moments that were good. But, I mean, the defense, he was looking like Chris Duarte out there. It just did not look good. And it didn't look encouraging at all for the Kings bench. So, we need Lyles back. We need McLaughlin. We need Herter. We need these guys back because it doesn't look pretty at the end of the Kings roster. But there were a few guys that made positive impacts. I mean, Alex Len is just a guy who you always expect to come in and make a positive impact. I love Alex Len so much. Like, you guys don't even know. He is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. I mean that with my full heart. He's so good. People don't understand the skill set that Alex Len has. He was out there playing against some Warriors starters or key bench players. He was out there with a bunch of G Leaguers, and he was just running the show with the ball in his hands. He is an amazing facilitator. He was getting the ball at the elbow and making the right play every single time, setting guys up. His stat line, 21 minutes, he went 5 for 7 from the field, 10 points. He had a steal, 5 assists, and 9 rebounds. He was running the floor, doing stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. He was occupying a defender inside as Monk drove into the lane, He was occupying that defender so that Monk could get to the rim, and it resulted in an and one for Malik Monk. You know, those seals inside. There was another moment, I think, in the fourth quarter where he's just running the floor. This massive 7'2" guy is beating everyone down the floor for an easy layup. He didn't have a block, but he affected so many shots at the rim. Had a bunch of screen assists. I mean, this dude is so good. And people don't understand how good he is with the ball in his hands and how good of a facilitator he is. He is the perfect backup to Domantas Sabonis. And this is not just me overreacting to one preseason game. This is what he has been doing for the past 2-3 seasons. This is who he is. So I just, I have to go off and give all the love to Alex Len. The other bright spots off the bench were, I would say, Isaac Jones, Boogie Ellis, and Broderick Thomas. So we can start with Isaac Jones, who played 20 minutes and was way better than we ever saw in Summer League. I don't remember him ever being like this in Summer League. I was coming into the season with what we saw in Summer League. I was under the impression that this was a guy that was never going to make it to the NBA level. One, because he can't shoot the three, although Mike Brown said he was knocking down a bunch of threes in their scrimmages in practice. But Mike Brown was talking about how he was a standout of training camp, and he airballed a three, missed another one. Like, the three-point shot doesn't look good, but he was impacting the game in so many other ways, way better than he did in Summer League. He was playing against much better opposition than he did at Summer League, and he was out there blocking shots, getting steals. No one was scoring on him. And then the offensive end was kind of where it was a real shock. Like, I knew he was a solid offensive player, but the way that every time he got the ball, it was just, I was so confident that he was going to make the right play. He bailed the Kings out multiple times on horrible possessions, just getting to the low post and scoring by himself. But really, it was the playmaking. He was playmaking out of the post. He was just making good passes. And he looked so comfortable handling the ball. He made a great move, driving to the rim with a little jelly finish. He was playing the 4. I could definitely see him getting minutes as a small ball 5. Because, like Alex Len, if you can slot Isaac Jones into that role, Sabonis can make plays from the elbow. Len can make plays from the elbow. I think Isaac Jones showed that he could do the same. And so that's really interesting, especially with that open roster spot and him being in a position of need. Because we have that open roster spot, and then Boogie Ellis, who has looked great in Summer League, was also good in this game. It's like, I feel like Boogie Ellis would be a great guy to have on a two-way. And so it's just interesting if Isaac Jones continues to play like this. Again, it's just one game, but Mike Brown said he was a standout of training camp. If he continues to play like this, could he make the roster and then someone else slides into a two-way spot? I think that could be interesting. Boogie Ellis, like I said, was a standout because he was just knocking down three-point shots and just playing with kind of the energy that he always plays with. So that was good to see. And then Broderick Thomas, who I admittedly don't know a ton about, but he hit his one shot, but he also locked down defensively. He was getting in there, crashing the offensive glass, which was nice to see, and that's a point of emphasis for this team. And I think for a lot of those guys at the very end of this bench, it's about making the right play every time you have the ball. And I thought he was just another guy that did that. And then we can just quickly go through some of the other guys. Colby Jones went 1 for 6, had a nice putback, but with him, there were so many opportunities for him where he got space going to the rim, and then he doesn't quite know what to do with it, and so he just drives into the defender and leaves in his feet and makes a pass or just throws the ball up towards the rim. It doesn't look like he's developed any feel for the game in that regards, and the game still speeds him up in those moments. So not a good showing for him. Scal came in for 7 minutes, hit immediately when he came in, hit a turnaround tough jumper. So that was cool. Other than that, not too much from Scal. Isaiah Crawford, another guy where there wasn't a ton from, but he had 2 moments where he used his body to create space inside, and shoot jumpers inside, and knocked one of them down, missed the other. But he's a guy we're going to see a lot in Stockton, and so I'm excited. Those kind of moments where he starts from the perimeter, either takes a handoff or just gets the ball and drives by himself without a screen, and he's using his body to create space. And then the last guy is Terry Taylor, who I definitely noticed was crashing the glass on every single possession, but other than that, didn't do much, was tossed a grenade on one play and turned it over. And not a lot of opportunity for him. I was really just hoping for like one play that would make Taylor really stand out to me, and it didn't come. And so hopefully it will come in these, next games. Obviously, preseason doesn't mean a ton, but I'm gonna, evaluate every single guy anyways and act like it's a real game. But I think the main takeaway from this is just how great the Kings offense looked. We're going to be a great offensive team this season, and that's really exciting. And I think if this team can get healthy, because it's already not looking great from a bench health perspective, but if there's a time to be injured, it's right now when the games don't matter. And so hopefully those guys can come back. I think Devin Carter is going to make a huge impact on this team's bench when he comes back in the middle of the season, because that's just so obviously a place of need for this team. But we're definitely still searching for that defensive wing player. Haven't found it yet. Doesn't look like we found it in Jalen McDaniels, but who knows? Maybe we found it in Isaac Jones. Although it would be nice to have a guy who could actually shoot a three. The Kings' next game is in San Francisco on Friday. And so I think the things that I'm hoping to see, hoping for a more connected defense from the team. I want to see if Sabonis is still taking those middies and still knocking them down. And then for a guy like Isaac Jones on the bench, it's a huge opportunity for him if he can continue to play well to possibly get that roster spot. And then for guys like Jalen McDaniels, Colby Jones, those guys got to bounce back and be a lot better. Because I love watching the starters for the Kings do what they do, but at the end of the day, preseason doesn't really matter for them. But it matters a lot for the guys at the end of this bench. But that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. If you made it this far, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Shout out to Joe Mama and Cody Willis, as always, for being members. And I will see you guys on Friday for another preseason game. I'm so excited for Kings basketball to be back. Peace.